Thank you, everyone, for joining our webinar. Just to make it clear that you're on our webinar, this is the open house for Yale's Women on Boards program. We're on a lot of Zoom calls these days, so who knows, maybe you just stumbled into our chat and we're happy to have you here. I am Kristen Sorek West. I'm the Associate Director of Marketing for Yale School of Management, Executive Education. And as we kick things off, I just wanted to touch on a few housekeeping items. We are recording this webinar, and this webinar will be sent out afterwards to everyone who has registered. We are here to answer your questions. So questions about preparing for board service, upskilling to serve on a board, maybe you're currently on, finding a board, and more. So this is your time to get your questions answered. So please pose them. You can send them to me directly, or you can drop them in the chat. I will be moderating both and fielding those questions to our featured speakers as we go. Our guests, Paula and Kavitha, both currently serve on boards and attended our Women on Boards program. So the Women on Boards program is designed to help women and those who support them launch a successful board seat search. And we'll dive into this further as we go. So without further ado, please welcome Paula Volent and Kavitha Bindra. We're so happy to have you here today. And I would love it if you could start us off by just introducing yourselves a bit further, giving some background, perhaps your most current role and the boards that you're serving on or have most recently served on.
Why don't you start?
Thanks, Paula and Kristen. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Kavitha Bindra. I'm the Assistant Dean for Executive Education at the Yale School of Management. And I'm fortunate to both be an alum of the full-time MBA program at the School of Management, as well as the Women on Boards executive program. And I have worked across healthcare and the higher education industries for a number of years, but have spent much of my career working at the Yale School of Management. And as I noted, most recently have overseen executive education at the school, which means the non-degree learning portfolio at the School of Management. I am a single mother of two girls, and 12 and 7, so that consumes much of my time. But in terms of board service, I'm currently serving on 2 nonprofit boards. One is the Consortium for Graduate Management Education. This is a national board that brings together folks in higher education who are interested in increasing the representation of underrepresented minorities in graduate management education, i.e. Business schools. I also serve as the board president of my daughter's independent school here in New Haven. And I am looking at some possible corporate board service, primarily in the education technology field. And I'm happy to talk more about that and what that search is looking like as we go into the discussion. So thank you, and I'll pass it off to Paula.
Yeah, thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. I am a grad. I did take the Women on Corporate Boards when it was on site at Yale School of Management, which was really great. I also took remotely the Women and Leadership, which was fantastic. So I really love the executive education. I'm currently the Vice President and Chief Investment Officer at the Rockefeller University, which is a biomedical research institute. Prior to that, I spent 21 years at Bowdoin College as the Chief Investment Officer. I'm a proud graduate of Yale School of Management. I'm actually having my 25th year reunion this year, which is unbelievable. And we were just talking that my daughter was born at Yale when I was there. And so I have a 26-year-old daughter who is a scientist. I started my board work working for a lot of not-for-profits. And one of the things you'll see is that a lot of boards need people with specific expertise, whether it's financial, investment, marketing, all that. And so a lot of times you have to think of what expertise you can bring to a board. I'm really proud that there's a big push for women to be on corporate boards, because especially in some of the finance institutions, it's been primarily older white men, and it's refreshing and also good for the companies to have women on there. I serve on multiple not-for-profit, more investment committees, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Pritzker Family Foundation, the National Gallery of Art. I also serve as on the board of, I was in the arts before I came to Yale, so I serve on the board of the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture. I have always worked at a not-for-profit, so I've always reported to a board, so it's been really interesting to be on the other side of the table, and also to see how, you know, to be in their seat and how they're asking questions. I currently serve on the corporate board of MSCI, which is the Market Index Fund, and it's a big job. One of the things that you'll find is I get stock distributions from MSCI, so I do get a remuneration, but it's a lot of work, a lot of reading, and it's episodical around when they have their board meetings. So I'll leave it at that, but happy to answer a lot of questions. I think one of the things you need to think of, you have to dive down, and why this program is so important is because you're going to have to be on a committee, and you need to get some information or some skills and, you know, practice. And are you going to be on the audit committee, the strategy committee, the corporate governance, finance? And these are all things that are covered in the Women in Boards program, which is, which I found extremely helpful prior to stepping into that corporate board. So I'll open it up there.
Wonderful, wonderful. So you both have been on boards for a while. When you were considering joining a board, what was your motivation before you even joined your first board? What was your motivation for joining a board?
Go ahead, Paula.
Okay, my motivation for joining not-for-profit boards was the first not-for-profit board I joined was actually a land trust, the Maine Coast Heritage Trust, and my mentor at Yale, David Swenson, pushed me into doing that. That was my first exposure of being on a board. But for the corporate board, I took the Yale program because as I got later in my career, I thought when I retire, I would like to have a lot of board, but, you know, maybe have some board seats, not play golf. I don't play golf, but anyways, I would like to continue to be immersed in, you know, the world of finance and all of that. So that was one motivation. The other motivation was I'm a lifelong learner, and being on the board of a corporation is so interesting as far as regulations, cybersecurity, proxy voting, the whole process that you have to go through on a corporate board that is so interesting and also ever changing. So the intellectual sort of curiosity of how a company runs from, you know, like the inside, it was really interesting to me. So that motivated me to look for a corporate board.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback on that and, you know, say that being involved with nonprofit boards, and that's really been, you know, the focus of my board service to date, was really driven by a desire to serve organizations that I care about quite a bit. And, you know, one of the, the sort of driving mission of the School of Management is to educate leaders for business and society. And, you know, I think that's sort of the ethos that Paula and I were steeped in, you know, in our graduate education. And, you know, it's really something that I've sought to bring forward in my work outside of my primary career. So, you know, having a skill set that can be helpful to not-for-profit organizations that I care about really, I think, motivated me to seek out that type of board service. You know, I think in terms of thinking about corporate board service, for me, it's really, you know, I think it's critical to think about organizations or companies that I can really be helpful to and that I understand. And, you know, that's why I've been very selective in thinking about education technology, because that's an area that I growing expertise in, in my current role at the Yale School of Management. And, I think to Paula's point, the ability to bring in a perspective that's different from what traditional, quote unquote, traditional board members who are, perhaps male, perhaps white, and bringing in that different perspective and really bringing in some representation at that level, I think is really motivating. So that was really, I think, what led me to take part in the Women on Boards program. First of all, it is a program that, my department puts on. So it was an exciting opportunity to take part in that and really see how that went. But more so, I think the chance to think about how I could be of most service to a corporate board and bring the qualifications and talents I've developed across the years into that space that isn't always really open to people of my background. So.
And I would say also that I have a lot of experience in investments. I've worked in, institutions for a long time. So why did I need to go to this program? It was amazing for me. First of all, I still keep contact with some of the women that were in the program with me. They were from Microsoft, from lawyers, all different, all different areas. And it was really interesting. And some of the things that we did something with the theater department about projecting yourself and being confident in a board meeting. We did things on cybersecurity and how to, do with cybersecurity. We also did things on on dysfunctional teams. And then we had to do a Lego thing where we had to build this Lego thing with a group of people, and you realized how to work with a group in like a board when there's dissent about something. So I thought I did want to be on a corporate board. I took the program, and I think it really added to my skill set when the MSCI came to me and asked me to consider coming on a board.
So before you, I mean, I love that you both attended Women on Boards, and I'm sure other folks will benefit from the program as well. But how did you decide that you wanted assistance with finding a board seat? How did you, what were your next steps after that decision of I want to join a board, then what?
I think for me, the then what was, I have no idea how to go about this. I don't know, who makes decisions about who gets on the board. I don't know, what sorts of firms there are out there or what networks I need to join or connect with to join a board. I don't really even know. I know I want to join something, but I don't know, what would make me attractive to a particular board. And so all of these questions, I think there probably are routes to finding those answers that would require a lot of individual time and research. And, for me, having a program like this that could help sort of provide that direction, as well as that cohort that Paula described that is sort of going through it with you, that was really attractive to me. And, all of those objectives were met through going through the Women on Boards program. I understand the ecosystem now in a way that I did not before.
Yeah, and we should mention that there are headhunters that come, specific to finding people on corporate boards. And so that connection was very valuable to me. There was also, people that helped you with your resume and your LinkedIn presence, and that was really important. And there was also a personal coach. And I think at the MSCI, they had a couple of people that were aging out. Someone suggested me, and I went in and I knew the questions to ask because I had been through the program. And so I appeared very confident, and I appeared that I could step into this role. And I think I credit a lot of that with sort of the basic things that I learned, and also the coaching that I had during the program, which I thought was very valuable. And it was funny because they looked at my resume and they just ripped it apart and made it simpler. I didn't have to say, I took math and what, some people, you don't update your resume, but for a board seat, you need to have a good resume. You need to look at your LinkedIn, and you also need to know the questions to ask. And that's what I thought I got through going to the program.
Briefly, we did get a question actually in about because Paula, you attended both Women's Leadership Program and Women on Boards. In what order did you take those programs, and how are they different for you?
Yeah, the first one I took was a Women on Corporate Boards. I've been interested in board leadership and being on so many not-for-profit boards. Actually, one of the reasons I came to Yale School of Management, I was in the arts, and I saw that sort of dysfunction of boards that didn't understand finance, but had to, like pay for art conservation, which I did, or do building projects or something like that. So I took that one first. And then in June, when I stepped down from Bowdoin I had a little break between coming to Rockefeller. And at that point, I thought it would be really good to do Women in Leadership, because I was coming into a new organization. And also I thought that built on top of what I had done in Women in Corporate Boards. And it was fantastic. I was skeptical at first because it was going to be all online, but it was really good. And I actually have a little notebook here with some of the things that I refer to occasionally when I'm trying to build a team. And as I took that program, it really helped me think about that.
So you mentioned, so we are getting more questions about that, and I will come back to them. I did want to follow up quickly, because you mentioned that you were on a nonprofit board, and then you wanted to move into a corporate board. And we've had a few questions about, like, what are the differences in serving on those boards? How do you make the jump from a nonprofit board to a corporate board?
I'll start. And I think that being on a not-for-profit board, there was a question I saw that, do you have to pay to be on a not-for-profit board? Not all the time. If you have a skill set that they're looking for, I think I never had to, I did eventually donate to the organizations that I was on, but it wasn't a prerequisite for me to be on the board. I think being on a not-for-profit board gives you practice on being on a board and being on a committee, like being on an audit committee or being on a finance committee, learning how to read a balance sheet. Talking about DEI or corporate governance in a not-for-profit thing, and you can build those skills and bring them into a corporate board. And I think when corporations see that you've had those not-for-profit boards and you've been on specific committees, that makes you much more interesting to find a board position.
Kavitha, I saw your head nodding, and so following up with you, any thoughts?
Yeah, as I described, I'm still in the process of making that jump, but I think what was really helpful to me with the program was really being able to clarify how to go about that search, as well as to clarify the types of companies that would be interested in me, and what skill set I could present to those companies. So I think that jump is certainly one that we try to talk about in this particular program. In terms of just general board service, I think this program will be helpful to you regardless, whether we're talking about a nonprofit or corporate board. Obviously the sort of responsibility to the particular stakeholders will be different between those two boards. But Paula and I were talking briefly before the panel, and we the sense I get is that in some ways the time commitment may not be so different, especially if you have a position of responsibility on a nonprofit board. It's still, I can tell you my board president role for this independent school I'm working with sometimes feels like a second full-time job. So, I think the sort of day-to-day responsibilities may differ across the boards that you're on, and you'll likely be compensated for corporate board service, but the responsibilities and time commitment may be somewhat more similar than you may think.
And also, I want to say that there's public boards, but there's also private boards of startup companies. And so I have a little bit of experience with that. I have been backing women entrepreneurs because I'm really hoping that there's more women-backed VC funds. And so on that, that's really interesting because you're watching this company, it could fail, but it's interesting. And so there are opportunities there. And in cases, that's a wide range of, you might be working for like a cosmetic startup and you need to have someone who has experience on marketing and reaching into other, you know, global markets. Or so the skill sets that are required vary considerably by which sector you're going into. For instance, at MSCI, we're just trying to find a diverse candidate that can do marketing that and branding. And you wouldn't think MSCI, which is a finance company, needs branding and marketing, but that's one of the skill sets that we really want to find.
So on the topic of offering expertise to an organization as a board member, a question we get often is, am I ready? Do I have enough experience? Is a gap between roles okay? How big of a gap is okay? And it all comes back to that question, like, am I ready? And how would you answer that?
I would say what I say to all my young interns and to every other woman out there: lean in. You can't be perfect. You're not going to be totally prepared. And also spend the first part of do your homework about the organization, read the materials. Like in the case of some of these corporate boards, that means hundreds of pages. If you have questions, like you don't understand something, ask a question. But I think the only way you can be on a board is to be on a board. And so you have to raise your hand, you have to lean in, you have to do your homework, and not be afraid to ask questions, and also sit back and watch the rest of the board, see what their risk profile is, see what the etiquette of the board is, and all of that. But I think women are always too afraid that they're not prepared and that they don't raise their hand. So I would say raise your hand.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And, you know, I think we often find that our male colleagues don't have the same trepidation about stepping forward and questioning their qualifications for board seats. So, you know, the worst that'll happen is if you raise your hand, you'll, you know, get a no. But the best thing that could happen is that you go through the process and it works. So, you know, I think if you think there's a possible match, if it's sort of catching your interest, if you do the preparation, then I don't think there's anything that should hold you back from thinking that you're ready and moving forward.
So we have a lot of questions coming in. I'm going to do my best to kind of group some of them together, field them over to you, Kavitha and Paula. I feel like you might also be keeping an eye on the chat as well. So if there's anything that's like really striking you, also please jump in there. But one question that Theron asked was like, how do you begin your search to serve on a board? And I think that's prevalent here, because you could begin your search with participating in a program like Women on Boards, but I think there are other ways too. Do either of you have any insight to offer on that front?
I mean, I use the program as sort of a jumping off space for me. You know, I had been on not-for-profit boards, but not corporate boards, and I felt it built the confidence in me. As you said, am I ready to be on a board?
Mm-hmm.
I do get asked a lot to be on boards like mutual funds and things like that. So you have to be pretty picky, because once you get in the flow, and also there are headhunters that once they know you, they call you and they ask you for references, and occasionally you have to say, you know, I would be interested in that. So I think some of the headhunters and the search firms that I met at Yale were very helpful to me. I think also you need to network with other board members. And so if you know people that are on a board of a company, or you get to know them, you know, a lot of people don't know if people want to be on boards. It's a lot of work. And also you do have a legal liability, you know. You do have coverage, insurance coverage, but if there's fraud or something like that, you're the board, you're liable for that. So you have to think very carefully about that. But I do think networking, letting people know you're looking for a board, and also for me, the jumping off place was the Yale program.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And I'll just give an additional example. As I mentioned, education technology is sort of the area that I'm interested in pursuing corporate board service. And I'll be heading to sort of the big conference in this area in San Diego. If any of you are going to that in a week, hope to see you there. My goal is to network and let people know that, I'm interested in joining a board, and, that there are going to be a lot of startups and really interesting companies there. And this is a chance to sort of get out there and let people know that I'm interested. So I think identifying opportunities like that to sort of connect in the particular industry that you're interested in, those are great opportunities. I know executive search firms that may not specifically be board search firms often have a board search practice. So if you're connected, through your industry to an executive search firm, letting them know that you're interested in board service, that's always a great idea, because people will think of you when a seat or a search is happening. So those are the types of things. I think there's obviously these more formal channels, such as a program like ours, or going through search firms. But I think a lot of it, as Paula said, is really the networking and knowing who's involved in these searches, or maybe on a board that may have an opening, in a year or so, and they'll think of you if you mention the interest. So doing a lot of that research. LinkedIn is a great resource for that, as well as your alma mater networks and all of that. So, the networking is really key.
And also at MSCI, we are, as I said, we're looking for a woman or a person, diverse person to take the marketing position. So Stanford actually, and Yale, I think I reached out to Yale and got a list of women that had been through the Women on Boards thing. I gave that to the headhunter. And then also Stanford has one, they gave that to the headhunter. So people are looking to Yale and some of these organizations that have started programs like this for a list of people. And also the SEC and corporate governance, they're demanding to see diversity both on the board and within the institution. So I think there is a real conscious, sort of attempt right now to put more women in on boards, and to put more women in sort of visible leadership positions, like the head of a committee or something like that, on boards. And it's going to be going. I know in California they passed the law. I don't know how that has gone about women on boards. And in Europe, I think it's going much better in some ways than it has in the US. But this is a trend, and there's going to, they're going to have to find women. The one thing I would say though is, think about what committee you would be good to be on. What's your skill set? And, and committees aren't just about finance. They are about marketing, branding. They could be about strategic visions in something like a toy company or something. I don't know anything about toys. That would not be my thing. But it depends on what sector your expertise in is, and then think about which committee you would be on, because you're on the whole board, then you're also on committees.
That's such a critical point, Paula. And I think, for me, that was one of the big takeaways from the Women on Boards program, is really know how to sort of present and package yourself when you're talking to a board or going through a search process. Just sort of saying, hey, I'm interested in board service. I have this, high level position at this company. And, that's great. That gets you noticed, but that doesn't get you on a board. You have to really show that you can contribute to the board, and that you have a specific expertise that they're looking for. And, one of my fellow cohort members in the Women on Boards program, she is an executive at Subway, and, has some franchising expertise. And while we were going through the program, she happened to get contacted about a opportunity with an Australian franchising company that was looking for someone with her very specific expertise. And, it was, she jumped at it. She ended up, I think, competing with 5 or 6 others for that board seat. She got it. And she said it was so great to be sort of doing the real-time preparation, while I was going through the program and going through these interviews at the same time. And, I think it was, she was really able to show that she had that very specific industry expertise that, had the background, they were looking for a woman, looking for someone with global experience. She's based in the US. So that was, it all sort of worked out in that way. But I think because she was able to sort of jump on that opportunity with a very clear articulation of her industry and perhaps committee experience.
That's so
one thing about location about Australia, because for MSCI, we have meetings, we've had them remote, but we have, 2-day meetings. They have proxy votes and things like that, a lot of legal stuff. But you have to be able to attend the meetings. And I think more and more they're going to be in person. So like if you're on the West Coast and you can't make it to the East Coast for the meetings, in some ways that diminishes the opportunity. So you have to have the time to be on a board meeting. You have to create it, and you can't miss board meetings. Because actually, if you miss board meetings, it's reported in the corporate governance, materials that go to shareholders. And it could be that, you get an activist in there that says this person never attends the board meeting. So it's really critical that you make sure that you're going to take the time to do the work beforehand and also to attend the meetings.
So glad that you dove into leveraging your unique background, your area of expertise as a way to get on a board, and as a way to guide your conversations for searching for a board position. So many of us have developed technical areas of expertise, are crafting our niches right now. And so the prospect of offering it to a wider audience is like something that we don't have our muscles flexed in yet, right? And so we're developing that perspective. We've gotten a few of those questions in the chat, so I'm very grateful that you spoke to that. A few other questions that we received relate to like the time commitment. So you both mentioned how actually serving on a nonprofit board is comparable and in terms of time dedicated to serving on a corporate board. I wonder, can you revisit that topic again? And did you know before joining these boards how much of a time commitment it was? And once you got onto these boards, did it meet those expectations, or did that change?
I can tell you from MSCI that it's a lot of reading, a lot of looking at financial metrics and all of that. And also the people that the staff, the executive staff that I work with and that gives me the information are so wonderful. So they've helped me through it. But at the beginning, I was a little bit overwhelmed. We're doing, the CEO is very ambitious and he's doing all these things on ESG. We're doing something on crypto. We're doing all these different things. And so I think also it's good to know what the CEO, what the vision of the CEO of the company that you're going into. And also I wouldn't want to go into a broken company. I want to go into a strong company. And so I think you need to do your research before you take it, but it is a lot of reading, a lot of, at least for MSCI, which is a finance company, it's a lot of metrics and benchmarking and things like that. So, and then also I spend a lot of time for some of the boards that I'm on for not-for-profit. Some of them are hardly any work, because they hardly ever meet. And when they meet, it's just sort of a big oversight thing. And there's not, decisions that we have to make. So I think it varies by the board.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's really important, I think, when you join a nonprofit board to understand exactly what that means. Like Paula said, there are some that really are what I would call sort of figurehead boards that, are generally there to provide some oversight or advisory guidance. But then there are others that do have a fiduciary responsibility. And those boards tend to have, I think, require more from board members. And so it's always important to understand what kind of board you're joining. I think it's always helpful to speak to existing board members if you're considering joining a board, getting a sense for who your colleagues will be, what they see as their time commitment. If you're working with a recruiter or a search firm, really ask those questions. Part of your interview process for a corporate board is for them to interview you, but for you also to get a sense for what exactly they're looking for, what the board culture is, what are the issues that you're looking to fix. To Paula's point, it's a very different experience joining a board to fix a broken company versus something that may be more in your wheelhouse. I'm a fixer, so I like fixing broken toys, but that may not be what your particular interest or time commitment allows. So I think really asking those questions and understanding the organization and the board culture that you're joining are really critical, taking that time to do that. But, in terms of how much time or what time commitment makes sense, I think that that's clearly an individual decision, depending where you are in your sort of career life cycle or, with family situations and all of that. I think all of those need to play into your decision making. But I will say I've purposely joined nonprofit boards that I feel like I'm really having an impact with and that do require time, even though sometimes I feel like I'm working multiple full-time roles.
So we're all familiar with the idea of when you interview for a job, you're interviewing the employer as much as the employer is interviewing you. Is that the same here when you're asked to join a board? Are you should you be interviewing the board just as they are interviewing you? And is it fair to ask a question about time commitment in those conversations?
100%. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Okay. And what other questions? Kavitha, you touched on this topic, so I'll volley it over to Paula, but do you have anything to add on the topic of interviewing a board if you're asked to join a board?
Yeah, I think again, just, asking what the culture is like, and, you can ask pointed questions like, what does preparation for a board meeting look like? I think to Paula's point, there are board meetings and you have to figure out how you're going to get there and make the time for those, but there's all the preparation that goes into getting ready for those, or, what happens between meetings, keeping on top of financials or world events that may be impacting the company or, what have you. So I think asking very pointed questions about what does time commitment really mean? It doesn't just mean a quarterly 2-day meeting or what have you. Like, what does it really look like on a week-to-week, day-to-day basis? I think that's a really important question to ask. I think you can get a sense for the types of people you'll be working with on the boards just by talking to them. Do you feel a connection with them? Do you feel like this is a group that would allow you to, really speak and contribute in a way that is helpful to the company and, is satisfying to you? So I think asking questions or just having those informal discussions ahead of time are really critical.
And also, to go forward on that, you want to be able to be respected on the board and have your voice heard. So when you meet with people, these people that you want to be with, are they going to respect you? Are they going to, when you speak, are they going to stop talking and listen? I think that's really important. You need to be respected on a board, especially a new person is coming into a group that's been together for a long time. What's that going to feel like? I mean, I think sometimes you think that you're only going to have one chance to be on a board. That's not true. You need to find the right board, and you need to find the people that you want to be working with. And I feel like for MSCI, I think they're doing some great things around environment and all of that. So I feel that they're doing a good job, in some ways making a difference. So that was important to me in my board choice.
I get a question in earlier about the difference between a board advisor and a board director. Are those two roles different in your experience? And is finding those roles different, or is it the same process?
I'm not quite sure about the nomenclature, but I think what the question is getting at is, uh, do you have a fiduciary responsibility or not when you serve on a board? And yes, I think there are board opportunities where there is not a fiduciary role. Uh, that may be more advisory. And, again, I think it's a helpful perspective to have and to offer if that's what you're looking for. But I think it's a different type of commitment to have a fiduciary responsibility, and that regardless of whether that's a not-for-profit or corporate board, if you have a fiduciary role, that does require, I think, an additional layer of responsibility. Doing all the due diligence as Paula described, doing the reading, looking at financial statements, understanding the competitive landscape, thinking about global events, thinking about sort of hot button issues that are impacting the financial viability of the organization or company that you're working with. And really being on top of that, I think, is a different level of commitment than a pure advisory role.
So in your journey during the Women on Boards program, after you left the program, Kavitha, were you in the same position as your classmate where you were interviewing for a board just while you were also in the program, or did you find these boards after you left the program?
So I'm a very recent graduate of Women on Boards. So I was in the last cohort, which wrapped up last summer. So the boards the nonprofit boards that I was serving on preceded this program, though I became the board president of my kids' independent school after finishing the program. And that was actually quite helpful to have that background going into that particular position. But I think what has been really helpful for me is, I've progressed in my search for the corporate board position, and just having the background and sort of having the concurrent nonprofit board experience going through the Women on Boards program was really helpful in thinking about the corporate board search. Nothing concurrent, but it was actually really helpful in sort of really helping me clarify and articulate what exactly my value proposition is to the boards that might be interested in working with me.
Yeah, and I can say that Jeff Sonenfeld, who's amazing, taught the thing, and he has so much energy around it. But when the MSCI approached me, he served as a reference for me, and that was really impressive because and that he was so great. And I just thought that this whole network that I got into through taking the program was really helpful to me in getting to the next step of being on a corporate board.
Yeah, and for those who may not know, Jeff Sonenfeld is the faculty director for our Women on Boards program, and is an expert in boards and CEOs and C-suite leadership, and has connections, really across a number of industries and companies. And as Paula said, is a huge advocate for graduates of this program, as well as School of Management alumni more broadly. So that's a really amazing resource that we have through Professor Sonenfeld.
The question that we received is about how does an organization decide to hire a board member? Who is doing the hiring? Is it the board? Is it some other members of the organization? How did that work for you?
It's usually a committee that's entrusted with it, which is entrusted with it. They don't usually use HR until later to check backgrounds and stuff, but it's usually a nominating committee, and they're trying to look for different characteristics. And so it's more a committee driven, because when it starts, it's all about strategy and trying to go through. There's a number of headhunters and they work with the nominating committees on boards, but I think HR comes in later, just as, sort of doing it. And when you come onto a board, they do a background check. It depends on the board. You might get stock in the board, you get remuneration and all of that. You have blackout periods where you can't sell the stock. You have inside information, which you have to be really careful about. But as I said, I love to learn, and being on a corporate board, I've learned so much about how a company works. And I've been in investments for almost 30 years, and it opened my eyes to so many different things.
And actually, you bring this a valuable point up. You have multiple degrees. You have multiple terminal degrees. So why is having a program like this helpful to someone who on paper seems like they should have all the answers?
Because it's targeted. It's skill-based, it's networking. Like, I went to Yale School of Management, and my network of alums in Yale is amazing, but this program set up a group of women who I highly regard and think are amazing, that we did this together. And also there are skill sets, like, as I said, we did a drama class reading Shakespeare on how we present ourselves. We didn't do, that's not in my normal resume. So there were particular skills and also tips on how to get into a board, or how to be more visible to be even considered to be a board, that I didn't have. So, I thought it was really a valuable thing, and I would do it again.
I just wanted to mention, I'm not sure if this group of women is from your cohort, Paula, but as we speak, there's a group of folks who went through one of the Women on Board programs. I think it's about 10 women who are currently meeting in Paris. They've kept in touch since the program. They've created.
That's not mine. I'd love to be in Paris.
There's a really strong, they have a really strong bond. They've been supporting each other through their board searches, and have just developed a strong personal friendship. So they're connecting right now, and I think they're all wearing Yale School of Management hats while they travel. So they had reached out to us to say.
Yeah, my group has got together a number of times to bring in like women entrepreneurs. We talked to some women from Carlisle, gave presentations about sort of being on a private board and all that. But yeah, it's a whole new networking group that you haven't had before.
I did on that group who's meeting in Paris. I think the majority of them are based in Europe, so it was like a convenient location for them to meet. But if they do become a globetrotting troop, please call me, because I would love to go on a trip with them too. We are getting some folks who are leaving the call. Some folks are joining the call, so thank you all for, if you're here and you're departing, thank you for joining us. If you're here and if you're newly arrived, feel free to field us your questions about board service. We are still going to linger for a few more minutes, so this isn't over yet. I'm just addressing that I've seen some departures come through in the comments, and I wanted to say thank you for your time before hopefully they left. So a great question from Renata in the chat is about this program, if it's offered only once a year. It is currently offered only once a year. The next session is in May. And it starts in May and actually falls through June. I'm going to share my screen so I can throw up some of the details of the program, as well as my contact information. So you can, here, let me just do a little bit of this, and I will share. So you can see how you can reach me with any follow-up questions. The program does start live online on May 25th. Here is where you're going to meet your cohort. You're going to be introduced to your material, and you're going to be given work to be done before you come to campus in June. And you'll be on campus for the full week. You'll bring that work with you. You'll continue your learning. It'll be full-time, Monday through Friday. And then afterwards, you will after the program, you will work with an executive coach to maintain that momentum in your board search. We do have two different experiences between Kavitha and Paula. One person took this program while it was on campus, and another person took this program while it was live online. Kavitha, any thoughts to add on terms of modality between the two?
Yeah, I think, just more broadly, because of the last 2 years and the global pandemic, we in executive education had to pivot completely to live online programming for this type of course. And so, while we covered much of the same material that Paula covered, it was delivered differently. And, I think we've done a lot of learning internally about how we can draw the best from both modalities into this particular program, hence the initial live online module followed by the week on campus. So, we're hoping that we can bring the best of both to this group that'll be joining us this year. And, you will have the time in between, as Kristen noted, to really get prepared for the program. And you will have the support after the program as well, virtually. So that's a really, I think, interesting hallmark about this particular iteration of the program. And we look forward to seeing how it plays out.
If you have any final questions, feel free to drop them in the chat now. We do have, the application is currently open. Registration will probably close later on, I want to say later on this month, maybe April. It's rolling admissions. So there is an application process. Drop me a line to learn more about that application process. I'm here to help. And while we would love for you to attend our program, your path may lead you in a different direction. So whatever path that happens to be for you, we just hope that we can be a valuable resource for you as you continue on that journey. Like I mentioned, if you have any questions, my contact information is right here on the slide. So feel free to reach out to me with anything. I'm going to just wrap this up and say thank you so much to Kavitha. Thank you so much to Paula for being on the call with us today and answering so many questions. I will be following up with those who have open questions in the chat afterwards, and I'll email you directly. So thank you, everybody.
It was an honor. Thank you.
Always an honor to join Paula Volent on our call.
Oh, but I learned so much from the program, so thank you. All right. Good luck, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yep.
Bye.